I never thought I would face trouble living in my own home. I bought this little house on Maple Street 2 years ago. It was my pride and joy, a place where I could finally feel safe and build a life. I had saved up for years, working hard at my job as a nurse, and after countless late shifts and long days, I had finally made my dream of homeownership a reality. When I moved in, I was excited to meet my neighbors. They seemed friendly enough at first. The couple next door, the Johnsons, invited me over for a barbecue. They were middle-aged, and their kids had already moved out. They made a big fuss about how lovely it was to have a new neighbor. I felt welcomed, and for a moment, all my worries melted away. But as time went on, things began to change. It started with whispers. I would hear them talking when I walked by, their voices dropping to a hush as I approached. At first, I dismissed it. Maybe they were talking about something personal. But then the whispers turned into complaints. I found out from another neighbor that the Johnsons were unhappy with me living there. They claimed I was too loud and had too many visitors. I was shocked. I always kept my music low, and I followed noise regulations. But they didn't stop there. They began to file complaints with the homeowners association about my yard, my car, and even my guests. I felt like I was under a microscope. It was exhausting, and it hurt. I wanted to belong, but I felt like I was being pushed out. One afternoon, as I was coming home from work, I saw Mrs. Johnson standing on her porch, arms crossed, watching me. I took a deep breath and tried to smile, but she just turned away. The weight of her disdain felt heavy on my chest. I was determined not to let it get to me, but it was hard. Then, one evening, I received a letter from the homeowners association. They accused me of not maintaining my property properly. They mentioned my grass was too long and that I had too much clutter on my porch. I was furious. I took pride in my home. I worked hard to keep it in good shape, but now it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. I decided to go to the next homeowners meeting to defend myself. I wanted to show everyone who I was and that I cared about my home just as much as they did. I prepared a little speech, hoping to clear the air. When I arrived at the meeting, I was nervous. I felt out of place among the crowd of older white homeowners, but I stood up and spoke from my heart. I talked about my love for my home and the community. I explained how hard I worked and how much I wanted to fit in. As I spoke, I noticed some heads nodding in understanding, but when I finished, the Johnsons were quick to respond. They claimed I was a nuisance, and that my presence brought down the neighborhood. Their words stung. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. I was not going to let them see me cry. The meeting ended with more complaints filed against me. I left feeling defeated. How could I change their minds? I was just a woman trying to live her life. Days turned into weeks, and the complaints kept piling up. I started to feel isolated. I would see neighbors outside, laughing and chatting, but they would go quiet when I walked by. It felt like I was in a bubble, watching a life I wasn't part of. I spent more time at work and less at home. I didn't want to face the judgment that seemed to linger in the air around me. Then one day, I met a young girl named Mia. She lived a few doors down and was new to the neighborhood. She had bright curly hair and a smile that lit up her face. Mia would come over to play with my dog, Max. I welcomed her with open arms. One afternoon while we were playing in the yard, Mia turned to me and said, "Why don't the other kids play with you?" Her question hit me hard. It made me realize how alone I had become. I took a deep breath and replied, "Sometimes people don't understand others who are different from them." Mia frowned. "But you're nice, they should play with you." Her innocent words filled me with warmth. I realized that I didn't have to let the negativity of others get to me. I had Mia, and she saw me for who I was. As the weeks went by, I focused on what truly mattered. I spent more time with Mia and discovered a newfound strength within me. I began to work on my yard, planting flowers and trimming the bushes. I wanted to show everyone that I cared about my home and that I was here to stay. I also started to reach out to other neighbors. I baked cookies and brought them over, hoping to break the ice. Some neighbors were friendly, while others still seemed distant, but I kept trying. Every time I knocked on a door, I felt a little braver. Then one day, I got a knock on my door. It was Mrs. Johnson. I was surprised to see her standing there, arms crossed, looking stern. My heart raced. "I wanted to talk to you," she said. I nodded, unsure of what to expect. "I've heard some things about you," she continued, "and I want to apologize." I blinked in disbelief. "Apologize?" She sighed, looking down at her feet. "I didn't give you a fair chance. I let my fears and biases get in the way. I'm sorry for the complaints. I realize now that I was wrong." Her words caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond. "Thank you," I finally managed to say. "I appreciate that." We stood in silence for a moment, and then she asked if I would join her for coffee. I hesitated but agreed. As we sat together, the warm steam of our coffee rising between us, the conversation began to flow naturally. At first it felt like a delicate dance, hesitant, unsure, but as the minutes passed, something shifted. Mrs. Johnson began to share stories about her children, her eyes lighting up as she talked about their lives, their successes, and even their struggles. I found myself leaning in, genuinely interested, and it made me realize how much we all have in common, despite the differences that once seemed so vast between us. In return, I opened up about my journey as a nurse, the long shifts, the challenges, the exhaustion, but also the fulfillment that came from caring for others. It was my way of sharing who I really was, beyond the judgments and assumptions. I wasn't just the new neighbor. I was a woman with dreams, with a story. I wanted Mrs. Johnson to see that, and as I spoke, I could see her listening, really listening, as if the walls we had both built around ourselves were slowly starting to crumble. The tension that had hung between us for so long began to dissolve, piece by piece. The next few months were a blur of small victories. I didn't expect overnight changes, but the relationships I had begun to build with my neighbors grew stronger with each passing day. I had always felt like an outsider, but now I started to see glimpses of what it might be like to truly belong. I reached out more often, bringing over baked goods, helping with yard work, even just striking up casual conversations while walking Max. And with each interaction, I learned more about the people around me. I learned that some of them, like me, had their own insecurities, their own fears of not fitting in. It became clear that we were all just trying to find our place in this world, trying to figure out where we belonged. The more I got to know them, the more I realized that the walls we had built weren't just about me. They were about us, about all of us, trying to protect ourselves from the discomfort of the unknown. We were all guarded, unsure of each other, until the moment when we took a step forward, vulnerable and open, ready to break those barriers. Slowly but surely, I began to feel accepted, not just tolerated. And then one day, I received a letter from the Homeowners Association. My heart raced for a moment, expecting yet another complaint. But when I opened it, I felt my breath catch in my chest. The letter wasn't about a violation, about my yard or my visitors. It was a letter of praise, a recognition of the efforts I had made in the neighborhood. The association acknowledged my hard work, my commitment to making this place feel more like a community. A sense of relief washed over me like a cool breeze on a hot day. For the first time, it felt like I wasn't fighting against something. I was fighting for something, and I had won. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that everyone could see, but in my own quiet, steady way. The complaints stopped, the judgment, the cold shoulders, they faded into the background. The battle was over, not because I had conquered it with force, but because I had chosen to rise above it, to meet people where they were, and to show them who I truly was. And in the end, that was all I needed. I had fought against the odds, and in my own way, I had won. The victory wasn't about changing others, it was about changing myself and letting go of the fear that had once held me back. Now, I could finally breathe, knowing that I had found my place, not just in the house on Maple Street, but in the hearts of the people around me. And that was all I had ever wanted. Mia had become more than just a neighbor to me. She had become my little buddy, my companion in this journey toward finding peace. Her bright eyes and infectious laughter brought warmth to even the coldest of days. Sometimes, I'd take her along to community events, not just because she was a sweet child, but because in those moments, I felt like I was finally connecting to the world around me. Watching her join in with the other kids, laughing and playing without a care in the world, it was like seeing a piece of my own heart being accepted. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I truly belonged. I no longer felt like an outsider, standing at the edge of the crowd. Watching Mia interact with the other children, seeing them accept her as one of their own, gave me hope. Hope that someday, I might be able to forge those same connections, that I might no longer feel invisible. As the days passed, I realized that it wasn't just Mia who had made me feel welcome. It was the way my heart had begun to open up to the people around me, to my community. They were no longer distant strangers. They were becoming friends. And in those small moments I saw how much they had come to accept me, flaws and all. Then, one evening, as I sat on my porch, a quiet stillness settled over the street. I leaned back in my chair, letting the cool breeze brush against my face. The sun was setting, casting a golden light that gradually faded into shades of orange and pink. It was one of those moments when everything seemed to pause, and I took it all in. The beauty of the world, the peace I had fought so hard to find. The warmth of the setting sun filled me with a deep sense of peace, and in that peaceful moment, I realized something powerful. I had built a home, but it wasn't just in the physical sense. It wasn't about the walls, the roof, or the decorations. It was something deeper, something more profound. I had built a home in the hearts of those around me. It was the laughter shared with Mia, the conversations with my neighbors, the quiet moments of connection. I had worked hard for this, not just for the space to call my own, but for the feeling of truly being seen, heard, and accepted. And in that moment, as the colors of the sunset painted the sky, I knew that this was what I had been yearning for all along. A sense of belonging, a place where I could be myself, surrounded by people who cared. It was more than just a house on Maple Street. It was a home in every sense of the word. And that, at last, was the peace I had been searching for. I had been through so much, endured countless sleepless nights filled with doubt, loneliness, and heartache. Yet, as I stood there, taking in everything around me, something shifted within me. I realized that I could take all the pain and judgment I had faced, those whispered comments, the cold stares, the isolation, and turn it into something beautiful, something stronger than I ever imagined. The hurt, the rejection, it didn't define me. What mattered was how I responded to it. I had learned to stand tall, to hold my head high despite the weight of others' opinions. I had learned to be resilient. Every small step I took forward was a victory, and with each step, I had made my community a little brighter. It wasn't just about the struggles I overcame, it was about the strength I had gained from them. In the end, I realized it wasn't just about the house on Maple Street. It was never just about the bricks, the walls, or the yard. It was about finding my place, finding where I truly belonged. It was about breaking down the invisible barriers that had once separated me from others, and turning those walls into bridges that brought us closer. For so long, I had felt like an outsider, like I didn't fit in. But now, as I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, faces that had once been unfamiliar, distant even, I saw something different. They weren't just strangers anymore. They had become friends, people I could rely on, people who had seen me for who I really was, not just as an outsider. And in that moment, a sense of peace settled over me. I knew that no matter how hard it had been, every ounce of pain, every struggle, had been worth it. The journey, with all its highs and lows, had brought me to this place of acceptance, of understanding. I had built more than a house. I had built a home, not just for myself but for all of us. I had created a space where love and understanding could thrive. As I gazed around at the faces of those who had once judged me, who had once turned their backs, I could see it now. The divide had been erased, not by force, but by time, patience, and vulnerability. And now, there was only acceptance and kindness. I knew deep in my heart that love, true, unconditional love, could overcome even the deepest divides. It had brought us all together in ways I never thought possible. That was the true beauty of it all. Hey there, amazing viewer. I hope you enjoyed this story and found something meaningful in it. If you did, don't forget to show some love by hitting that subscribe button so you never miss out on more exciting content like this. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going. And of course, share this with your friends and family if you think they'll enjoy it too. The more the merrier. Thanks for being part of this journey with us. Your support means the world. See you in the next one.